I do have a. Can I ask you a tangent question? Because I've just thought of something. It's to do with Russia, Ukraine, but it's sort of more about world politics and world policy. So here's the question: world leaders unanimously would identify the Ukraine as a sovereign country, independent state, actual real country, and that Russia is wrong. That statement would be correct?
Yeah, and
Okay.
that was the case of Russia. Let's be quite clear. In 1994, when Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons, it did so in return from a solemn pledge from Boris Yeltsin's government that they fully recognise the territorial integrity of Ukraine and its sovereign independence. And so Mr. Putin's actually violated a pledge given by a previous Russian government. So yes, that is the case. And I think the evidence of the fighting, the proof, the old saying, the proof is in the proof of the pudding's in the eating. The Ukrainians, if Ukraine was really part of Russia, then they wouldn't be encountering the resistance they're encountering, which is ferocious resistance. They're literally prepared to fight for every house in Kiev and Kharkov and other Ukrainian cities.
So the question I have for you, that is a big tangent, and I get that, but it's something I don't know too much about the kind of the history of this, which is why I'm asking it. So if the world leaders see Ukraine as an independent sovereign country, real country, state, and Russia is wrong, why do we get so many world leaders fumbling and stumbling over Taiwan? Because can't you ask the same question? Taiwan is a sovereign, independent country, a real country, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But leaders won't stand up and say, no, China's wrong. The reason I asked this was I asked this question to James Shaw and had him on a podcast last year, and he kind of wouldn't answer the question. And so I left it because I'm not a rude person, but I'm interested if the world leaders see Russia wrong, Jeremy, I heard you laugh there, Jeremy, Ukraine being an independent state country, why won't they do the same with China and Taiwan? I get it tangent, but it just interests me.
Yeah. And that question is becoming increasingly more of a burning one because Taiwan has demonstrated that it's a vibrant democracy. And also, in the last election, the Chinese did quite significantly interfere to try to support the opponent, to the person who won. So, yeah, it is a very important question. I suppose to some degree, Taiwan hasn't declared independence. If it declared itself an independent state, then that would probably change things a bit. It would change things a great deal. Of course, the Chinese have made it quite clear that should Taiwan declare independence, then they'll be taking some sort of action. But of course, China's watching this situation in Ukraine very carefully. But you know what? They are very nervous about what a lot of people are assuming, that the Chinese are fully behind the Russians. I don't think that's the case. I think they've got measured support for Russia. They both have authoritarian systems. And they both want to act as counterweights to the United States. They don't want the US being all dominant at the international level. But China, let's be quite clear about this, its rise to superpower status is entirely due to its full-blooded participation in the world capitalist system. So China is in a different situation to Russia. First of all, it's a genuine superpower. Russia's a regional power with heavily armed regional power. Russia's economy is smaller than Italy's. China's economy is set to overtake the United States economy in aggregate terms by about 2028. I think China, it was also alarmed, is getting increasingly alarmed by what's happening in Ukraine. China has over 10 billion in terms of investments in Ukraine. So the sight of Ukraine being smashed up with these missile attacks is causing problems. Also, they were not particularly, I imagine, they weren't particularly pleased when Mr. Putin suddenly recognized the independence of separatist groups within the territorial space of Ukraine. Why? Well, they may worry that outside powers may suddenly recognize the independence of Uyghurs in China, or may go and recognize the independence of Taiwan.
Or Tibet.
So, you know, the Chinese, their position in international relations is They are very keen. They're very conservative. They're very keen on sovereignty and respecting it. And they have been saying they still uphold support for the territorial integrity of Ukraine. So, I think China's trying to have it both ways at the moment.
Right.
It's trying to indicate to Mr. Putin they understand his concerns, but he should settle them peacefully if possible. And I also think it's a marriage of convenience. I don't think it's one of principle. I think China does not regard Russia as an equal. I think Mr. Putin would like to be treated as an equal, but I don't think he's going to get that from the Chinese. And the other thing is they may be viewing Russia as a commercial opportunity, because if the Russians are really squeezed, where can they go? They can go to China, and China will say, oh, thank you very much. But evidence of that occurred when the sanctions went on after the Crimean invasion, where Mr. Putin had to go cap in hand to Beijing for a gas deal. And guess what? It was a deal very much in Chinese commercial terms, very favorable in Chinese commercial terms. So there's no room for sentiment when it comes to business as far as Chinese are concerned. So I'm skeptical about the big coalition between China and Russia.